Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're tackling something that is, well, it's pretty much the foundational layer of all modern technology. We're talking about open source software, OSS. And for most of us, especially if you're not on a development team, you hear open source and you immediately think free.
Right. Free as in it doesn't cost anything to download.
But that view is so simplistic, and it completely ignores the immense economic power behind it, the strategic advantages, and frankly, the critical operational risks involved.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really need to move the conversation from thinking of OSS as like a niche hobby project to what it actually is. It's a global, multi-trillion-dollar industry, and it demands an intentional strategy, not just accidental adoption.
Exactly.
So our mission here is to give you that strategic framework you need so you can really get the benefits of OSS while, protecting yourself from the risks.
And let me just set the stage with something I can say with near certainty. If your company develops any kind of software, you are already using open source. Oh, for sure, whether you know it or not.
Absolutely. It's likely running your infrastructure. It's embedded deep inside your commercial products. It's in your supply chain. The prevalence is it's staggering. And that's why moving from just passively using it to strategically managing it is probably one of the most critical decisions a leader can make right now.
So let's nail down the definition first, because the philosophy here is actually, I think, pretty profound. It's about capturing the world's collective, intellectual effort, all this creative freedom, but as code.
It's brilliant people from all over the world collaborating to build software that is, by design, open for everyone to see, to contribute to, and to use. And that transparency is really the key. I mean, to be officially called open source, the software has to meet several criteria that guarantee that freedom. The absolute core principle is that the source code has to be available. Anyone using it has to be able to look inside. Transparency isn't a feature, it's the prerequisite.
Okay, so having the code available is step one. But it's the license, right? That's what actually grants the rights to do things with it.
Precisely. It must be free to be redistributed. And crucially, you're allowed to create derived work.
Meaning you can build on top of it.
Yes, you can take that code, you can modify it, and you can build your own innovation on that open foundation. But, and this is important, you have to maintain the integrity of the original author's source code.
And our sources are clear this goes way beyond just the code itself. It's about a complete lack of restriction.
It is. The license has to be distributed with the code, but it can't discriminate against anyone. No discrimination against people, groups, fields of work, or even technology.
So a license couldn't say, you can only use this on brand X hardware.
Exactly. That would fail the definition. Open source grants, quite literally, freedom of software.
Now, when companies use this software, it seems to fall into two main buckets. The first one is frameworks and libraries.
Yeah, think of these like components, Lego bricks almost. They're these modular pieces of code that do one very specific thing. Maybe it's a cryptography library or a really sophisticated graphing tool.
So it's not the whole application.
Never. They're always meant to be just one piece of something much bigger.
And the second category is solutions.
Solutions are the applications themselves. They're standalone. A full chat program, a database system, you can use it on its own without plugging it into anything else.
Okay, let's talk about scale. Because this is where the conversation really shifts from, a philosophy about code to just massive industrial dependency. I want to repeat this number because it's wild. It's estimated that 96% of all software code bases in the world use open source components.
96%.
And even more critical for business, commercial applications. The software that companies actually sell can be made of up to 99.9% open source code.
That 99.9% number, it often trips people up. They ask, why would a company sell something that's almost all free stuff?
Right.
The answer is all about efficiency and focus.
And this is where that medical device example really clears things up. Can you walk us through that again?
Of course. So let's imagine a super complex proprietary medical device. The company's core innovation, their secret sauce, their IP, is all centered on one critical function. Let's say it's ensuring the extremely precise timing and dosage of a drug delivery. That's what they spend billions on R&D for.
That's their unique value. That's why a hospital pays a premium for their device.
Exactly. Now, that same device also needs to do other things. It has to connect to the hospital network, handle security, respond when someone presses a button, draw a graph on a little screen.
All necessary things, but they're basically generic IT problems.
They are generic IT problems.
Yeah.
And these problems have been solved and debugged and optimized thousands of times over by the open source community.
So why reinvent the wheel?
Why would you? Why would that manufacturer spend its precious time and R&D budget rewriting a networking stack? They just leverage robust, well-tested open source for all those adjacent needs. So when you see that 99.9% figure, it just means they were being smart. They focused their proprietary effort only on that tiny fraction of a percent that was their real market-differentiating innovation.
And the economic impact of this model is it's colossal. There was a Harvard study that tried to put a number on this. They looked at the supply side value, so what it would cost to actually produce all these common open source libraries, and they put that around $4 billion a year.
Which is a big number. But the truly staggering metric, the one that should make everyone sit up, is the demand side value.
Okay, so this is the value that the companies using the software get.
This is the value they capture. So if you calculate what they would have had to pay for commercial licenses for their own internal R&D to replace all that open source, the value delivered is estimated at $8 trillion.
$8 trillion. That single number just fundamentally changes how you have to think about OSS. It's not a free gift. It's a foundational piece of the entire global economy.
And that study had another key finding. Large companies would have to spend 3.5 times more on their software development if open source suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
That's the sheer scale of the leverage and productivity we're talking about.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because beyond just saving money, there are 6 key strategic reasons for companies to adopt OSS. This is about competitive advantage.
And the first one is fundamental: transparency and trust. Because the code is all out in the open, if you're, say, a major bank or a critical infrastructure operator, you have the ability to audit and inspect the code running on your most vital systems.
You can actually check it yourself.
You can verify its integrity yourself, which means you can make a truly informed decision about whether or not to trust it.
And number 2, it massively boosts productivity and interoperability. It does, because OSS is almost always built on open standards. It just naturally promotes interoperability, which is the exact opposite of getting locked into one specific vendor.
Let's dig into that vendor lock-in a bit more, which is reason 4. With proprietary software, you often hear about the friction of an MSA. For our listeners, what's an MSA here, and how does open source get around that?
So an MSA is a master service agreement. It's this huge legal contract you sign with a proprietary vendor. It defines everything: support, pricing, usage terms, and critically, how hard and expensive it is to leave them.
The switching costs are huge.
Immense. The legal and financial hurdles to pivot away are just massive. OSS completely bypasses all that legal friction.
So if I'm using an open source graphing library and it's not working for me anymore, I can just swap it out for another one tomorrow morning without months of renegotiating contracts. Exactly. No penalty fees, no lawyers. That flexibility is a massive strategic advantage. Then there's number 3, open collaboration. This one is fascinating. You see developers from companies that are direct market rivals, think competing cloud providers, all working together on core projects that push innovation forward for the entire world.
It's an incredible engine for progress. And moving to number 5, it's often the fastest way to get your hands on emerging technologies.
That's right. When a hardware company like Intel or AMD creates some new cutting-edge capability, let's say in confidential computing, the very first libraries and code showing how to use it are often released straight into the open source community. It allows for super rapid experimentation long before the polished proprietary tools are even ready.
And then finally, number 6, the obvious one, cost reduction. The software is free to download and use, which is a powerful alternative to expensive proprietary tools.
But, and this is the crucial pivot point of our whole conversation, this brings us to responsible consumption. Just because the code is free and available, it doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's robust or secure. Not all open source is created equal.
And not all of it is enterprise grade.
Not at all.
So we should probably define that term. If I'm making a strategic decision, what makes a piece of OSS enterprise grade versus, just something a hobbyist built in their garage?
Enterprise grade means it comes with the kind of features and institutional support you'd expect from proprietary software. So you're looking for things like engineering help and support, documented and timely security patching, a mature feature roadmap with clear timelines, and this is maybe the most important, guaranteed long-term support, or LTS.
LTS, so that means they'll keep it updated for what?
Often 5, 10, even more years. It's a promise of stability and access to updates.
Okay, so if a company hasn't formalized a strategy for this yet, they're basically using a critical $8 trillion piece of their supply chain without assessing their risk. Let's give our listeners the key risk assessment questions they need to be asking.
The first question is purely operational. What are our support requirements? If you're using this code in a core business function, something that absolutely cannot go down, you need enterprise-level support SLAs and guaranteed patches.
But if it's for an internal R&D project,
Then you might favor innovation. It'll be perfectly fine with a community best effort model.
and that kind of dictates the whole stability versus cutting edge trade-off. You might use the newest library on a dev board, but when that product ships, you have to prioritize stability.
Exactly. And that leads directly into the highest risk area of all, which is licensing. The third question has to be, what type of license are you okay with? And are you 100% certain you are using it correctly?
This is where the legal risk gets really intense. I know there are dozens of licenses, but maybe we can talk about the two big families and the danger one of them poses.
Absolutely. So on one side, you have permissive licenses, things like MIT or Apache 2.0. These are generally pretty safe for commercial users. They let you use the code in your proprietary product without forcing you to open source your own work.
But then there's the other category, the one that creates significant risk for companies that want to keep their own code secret.
That's the copyleft license family. The most famous one is the GPL, the General Public License. Copyleft licenses are often called viral. They have a condition that says if you create a derivative work from this code and then you distribute it, you might be legally obligated to release the source code of your entire derivative work.
Including your own proprietary code that you mixed with it.
Yes, all under that same open source license.
So if you use a copyleft library the wrong way, you could be legally forced to open source your company's secret sauce. The very thing you plan to sell. That's a commercial catastrophe.
Yeah. It is the single biggest legal risk in this whole space. The math flips entirely. When your free library suddenly means you have to give away your core IP, you absolutely must have your legal team involved to understand the precise boundaries of what derived work and distribution mean under these licenses.
And then there's that other risk we touched on, the operational one, the abandoned life.
Yeah, you build your product, the one you're promising to support for 12 years, on this great piece of OSS. But 3 years in, the main developer gets a new job, moves on, and crickets. The project just dies.
What happens then?
Well, now you have a critical dependency that's not getting any new features, and much worse, no security patches. So you either have to take on the maintenance burden yourself, basically funding the project internally, or you have to scramble to re-engineer your product with a different supported library. It's a huge, tangible risk.
Okay, so we've laid out the need and the risks. Let's get to the action. What are the concrete steps a leader should take to start moving toward responsible adoption?
The single most important first step is creating an internal, formalized open source strategy and policy. Every single company that develops software needs one, and it can't be ambiguous.
So what are the, say, 3 non-negotiable things that policy has to lay out?
First, acceptable license types. It has to clearly state if copyleft licenses are ever allowed, and if so, only in very specific cases, like internal-only tools, never in a customer product. Second, acceptable use cases. Can we use this for R&D prototyping or only for final products? And third, required support levels. When is enterprise support mandatory, and when is community best effort okay?
And I assume you absolutely have to bring your legal team in to create this.
That is mandatory due diligence, yes. Your lawyers need to sign off on the acceptable license list and what it means for your specific business model.
And for anyone listening who wants a good template, you suggested maybe a surprising source.
Yeah, look at the public sector. The U.S. Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, developed this incredibly intentional and public open source strategy. They detail exactly which licenses and in what situations their organization can use OSS. It is an excellent structured template for how to do this right.
Okay, so to put this into practice today, we've got 3 immediate action items for our listeners.
The first, you have to identify where you're already using open source. Because if you don't have a policy, I guarantee you're using it. So mandate the use of software composition analysis SCA tools. Get a detailed inventory of every single open source component and its license in your infrastructure and products. You need to know your exposure right now.
Second, start looking for new opportunities where using OSS gives you the biggest bang for your buck, whether that's cost savings driving innovation or just reducing that future vendor lock-in risk.
And third, establish that formal policy we just talked about. Be intentional. Use that policy to guide your path to a truly responsible and sustainable adoption model.
So we started this by calling open source free code, and we've landed on a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is the engine of modern technology, an engine that requires serious, sophisticated strategic management. The freedom and transparency it offers are, well, they're invaluable. But that intentional due diligence around licensing and support is the only way to protect your own interests while still benefiting from this incredible global innovation. So what does this all mean?
Well, we established that the demand-side value, the value captured by commercial companies using open source, is about $8 trillion a year. And yet, the developers and communities creating that fundamental software often struggle for sustainable funding. So here's the thought I'd leave you with. Given the immense financial value and leverage these major corporations are getting, what is the ultimate ethical and maybe even long-term business responsibility of those consumers to ensure the sustainable funding, the continuous security, and the vibrant community activity of the very open source projects they are completely dependent on for their own profitability? That's the strategic challenge that's worth exploring long after this deep dive is over.